This is Jambo Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Science Show with Dr. Dada on Jambo Radio Scotland, broadcasting from the city of Glasgow. Of course, as you know, on this show we explore the developments in science and in technology, and especially we explore how these affect our everyday lives. And that's why on today's show, the topic will be very, very interesting indeed. It is future-proofing data encryption. Future-proofing data encryption. So we're going to see what that is all about. And of course, when we talk about data encryption, something that comes to mind is passwords. As we know, passwords are ubiquitous in computer technology today. Every one of us has passwords. I have maybe hundreds of passwords. I can't even remember how many. But according to the Cisco's annual internet report from 2018 to 2023, the white paper says that nearly 2/3 of the global population will have internet access by next year. So that is to say, by 2023, the total number of internet users will reach something like 5.3 billion. And that's about 66% of the world's population. And that's up from 51%, which is about 3.9 billion in 2018. Now, of course, with this increase in internet usage and the need for securing sensitive data across industries, of course, we see that that need has never been greater. And this is especially the case in the light of recent global events that have seen increased data breaches. And of course, everyone using their phones, laptops, Internet of Things, smartwatches and so on and so forth, even smart cars, all these make the need for security of data even more pressing, doesn't it? So that's why the question for the week on this show is our data security future-proof? Is our data security future-proof? Now, what's the reason for that question? Well, it's the case that the fact that your data is secure today doesn't mean it will always be secure. And some data, they may need security now, but in some cases, you also need that security to continue well into the future. For example, some maybe past documents, relating to transactions, maybe health records, maybe documents relating to national security. Of course, you want those documents not just to be secured now, but you want them to be secure well into the future, maybe tens of years into the future. Well, I'm your host, Dr. Adetunmise Dada. I'm a lecturer in optics at the University of Glasgow. And of course, I love STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's what we talk about on this show. And we have fun while doing that as well. And of course, this is the Science Show on Jambo Radio Scotland, broadcasting live from Glasgow. And don't forget, you can listen to the show on DAB, that is digital radio, whether you're in your car, in your bathroom, whether you're at home, you're on the run. Of course, you can catch us and watch us live as well on jamboradio.co.uk. If you missed an episode, of course, you can catch up on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Jambo Radio Scotland YouTube channel. Great. So now let's do a quick run through of the contents of today's show. So we're going to start as usual with the science news highlights. We're going to, after that, talk about the basics of data security. So from a sort of STEM point of view, we're going to analyze some of the underlying science and technology that forms the basis for cryptography and encryption. And then we're going to have a discussion. The discussion is our data security future proof. And then in that discussion, you'll learn one or two tips on how to make your data more secure, specifically how to create stronger passwords. And then we're going to go into, of course, we love quantum in this show because quantum seems to be the source of magic. It seems to be the future, the basis of future technology. So we're going to talk about data security in the quantum age. And you're going to learn about what quantum has to do with data security. And then, of course, as usual, we're going to end with some jokes. And after that, we will, today we won't have a freestyle, but we will enjoy original music made by a physicist. So that will be interesting to listen to as well. Great. So as we said, encryption is what keeps our data secure. So for example, when you're shopping, when you're banking online, encryption makes sure that your data is scrambled so that your credit card details cannot be seen by hackers. And today, encryption involves new concepts and it's crucial for all of us. It's a bit like using coded language. So in some languages, sometimes if you want to say something in a way that children don't understand, mom and dad can speak in a way by maybe spelling the letters one by one. So this is something that we're all familiar with. So we're going to be thinking about that in today's show. So the question of the week once again is our data security future-proof? And we'll be receiving calls from listeners and viewers. So we'd like you to tell us ideas for creating memorable passwords and secure passwords. And also we have a challenge for you today, and it's to decode an encrypted pair of words. And the encryption challenge is FWIXK MYEAJYA. So again, FWIXK MYEAJYA. And you can call in even just to say hello or give some perspective on the question of the week. So the lines will open after our science news highlights and during our discussion section. Great. So now let's get into our science news highlights. So we have a couple of interesting headlines for us today. The first one, NASA flies spacecraft into asteroid in direct hit. NASA flies spacecraft into asteroid in direct hit. And then secondly, we have wildlife protection helps species thrive in European report. So wildlife protection helps species thrive. Let's see what that's about in a minute. And then ringed Neptune captured by James Webb Telescope. Next one, traditional computers can solve some quantum problems. So that's quite interesting. That's some big news. So we'll see what that's about in a moment as well. Then lastly, a third of artificial intelligence, that's AI, researchers think AI could cause catastrophic outcomes on par with nuclear war this century. So that's an interesting claim as well. Let's see what that's about soon as well. So just yesterday, the BBC, going to the first highlight, it reported that NASA flies spacecraft into asteroid in direct hit. Now this is an interesting piece of news because this is all to do with developing something called a planetary defense system. So the idea is, we've probably all heard about how, an asteroid supposedly killed the dinosaurs many thousands of years ago. And so the risk, exists that maybe an asteroid in space might fall into the Earth and cause catastrophic damage that will wipe out Earth, life on Earth as we know it. Now, the idea then is to design a spacecraft that carries maybe an explosive or, something like that is sent into space to crash into this asteroid and prevent it from, alter its course and prevent it from hitting Earth, should that ever be a risk. Well, this, in this case, this report is telling us that NASA successfully designed a mission whereby they flew a spacecraft and had a direct hit. The technology has developed and advanced to the point where the spacecraft is able to calculate its course so precisely that something that's so far away can be hit with precision. So on the BBC, it says that the collision was intentional and designed to test whether space rocks that might threaten Earth could be nudged safely out of the way. And the name of the spacecraft is called DART. It's called the DART probe. And DART's camera returned an image per second right up to the moment of impact with the target. And the target is about 160 meters wide, and it's an object called Dimorphos. Well, researchers will determine the success or otherwise by studying the changes to the orbit of Dimorphos around another asteroid known as Didymos. Now, telescopes on Earth will make precise measurements of the two-rock or binary system. So basically, what they're talking about here is you have a system, a binary system, whereby one bigger rock that's a lot huger, called the Didymos, is being circled by the Dimorphos. It's like a small moon. You know, it's two rocks, one very big, one smaller, and the smaller one circles around the bigger one, and they're kind of hurtling their way around in space. Now, if that was coming toward Earth, that would be a great danger. But the plan with this mission was to send this spacecraft to hit the smaller one and see whether they can change its path significantly. And of course, if they're able to do that, that would be fantastic. But the fact that it hits it with precision is already a huge advance in this kind of so-called planetary defense system. Now, just a few facts about these two rocks. So the one called Dimorphos has about 163 meters in diameter, which we mentioned before. The DART probe that smashed into it is only about 19 meters long, so we can kind of picture that. And then before the collision, Dimorphos took roughly 11 hours and 55 minutes to circle its 980 meter wide partner. So that's the bigger rock. It's about, almost a kilometer in diameter. And then the hope is that when the DART probe hit it afterwards, the smaller rock will take a little bit shorter time to go around its partner. So they'll be looking at that over the coming days and weeks. Now, Didymos, as I've said before, is like the planet, and then the Dimorphos, which is like the moon, is what was hit. And together, this binary system is about 11 million kilometers from Earth. So that's so far away. And it's just impressive that you can send something with such precision to something so far away and have a direct hit. So that's interesting. You can read more about that on the BBC. Now, fresh from yesterday as well, BBC, wildlife protection helps species thrive in Europe. So there's a report that's said this. So, of course, this report has said that many wildlife species are thriving in Europe thanks to protection and reintroduction. And it mentions some of the species that benefited from this. They include grey wolves, Eurasian beavers, grey seals, and European bison. And these are just some of the species that show the strongest recoveries. Now, you can read more about this on the BBC, but I'll just quote what the lead author of the report said. She's Sophie Ledger of the ZSL's Institute of Zoology. And she said that the findings gave grounds for hope. She said, this report gives cause for optimism and shows that given a chance with well-placed conservation efforts, wildlife can recover. So that's some good news, isn't it? Now, another piece of news from the BBC, so the third headline that we're looking at, is ringed Neptune captured by James Webb Telescope. So the recently launched super space telescope called the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, has returned spectacular new imagery of Neptune. So this is Neptune like you've never seen Neptune before. It showed Neptune with rings. Of course, the observatory's infrared instruments highlight features not seen in such detail since the Voyager 2 probe flew past the planet in 1989. So if you'd like to have a look at that, what that looks like, including the beautiful moons of Neptune, you can have a look at that on the BBC website. And next highlight, traditional computers can solve some quantum problems. So this has a little bit to do with what we'll be covering today. But the gist of this news is that quantum computers, as we'll talk about later today as well, quantum computers are a new paradigm for computing, and they can solve some problems like exponentially faster than the computers as we know them today, the normal sort of classical computers that we use. Now, this report is basically saying that they found that by using AI, they're able to solve some problems previously thought to be only solvable in an efficient way by quantum computers. Now they're able to solve them using classical computers with the help of artificial intelligence. And that report is published in the paper Science, and that's published quite recently. So the title of the paper is Provably Efficient Machine Learning for Quantum Many-Body Problems. So this is huge news. This is quite interesting. So I'd invite you to have a look at that. Great. And finally, a third of AI researchers think AI could cause catastrophic outcomes on par with nuclear war this century. Now, this is quite interesting because this is not coming from people look on the outside. This is coming from AI researchers themselves. And I think probably it's not a good sign when 36% of a field think that that field might end in a catastrophe. Well, the report says that a survey of scientists and researchers working in AI has found that around a third of them believe that it would cause a catastrophe on par with an all-out nuclear war. The survey was given to researchers who had co-authored at least 2 computational linguistics publications between 2019 and 2022. Now that's interesting. The actual study that made this discovery is on the archive, so archive.org. So the title is What Do NLP Researchers Believe? Results of the NLP Community Meta Survey. So yes, I'd invite you to have a look at that as well. But just a few comments on that. If you think about it, when it comes to AI, so basically the idea with AI is to allow a machine to study a problem or to study a set of data, and from that learn how to maybe predict something or how to do a task. And there are so many ways AI is being used today. Goes from art to science to engineering, And just to think that I think a lot of people believe that a time might come when the AI becomes smarter than humans. And more importantly, a time might come when, AI becomes self-aware. And then they can start deciding, what, these humans need to be put in their place, and it can become, some sort of catastrophe. Or maybe even it takes over when the intelligence surpasses human intelligence, if you like. Maybe it takes over, maybe gets in the wrong hands and it's used in really bad ways. So that's kind of where the concern comes from. But it will be interesting to see how AI develops. So just once again, the question of the week is our data security future proof? So our lines are now open and you're welcome to call us in the studio. The number to call is 07437 826 865. So I'll say that again, 0743 782 6865. And the number is on the screen if you're watching us live on jamboradio.co.uk. So call us. You can, tell us some ideas you have for creating memorable passwords, or you can tackle our encryption challenge. So the encryption challenge that we have today is FWIXK MYEAJYA. So this is, 2 words that mean something, but now it sounds like it doesn't mean anything because it's been encrypted. And we're going to talk about different ways to encrypt, and maybe that gives you one clue or two about how to decrypt it. So please feel free to call us from now until the lines close. All right. So now we've come to the third item on our show, and that's where we'll be discussing some definitions. We're going to be talking about cryptography and encryption. So as we said earlier, cryptography is, or encryption, is something that we all use in our everyday life. But the question is, when was it invented? So to answer that question, well, it's something that's been around since time immemorial. I think it's probably hard to say when it started. I think it's probably as old as civilization or as humans, the human race itself. But one could say, in terms of documented evidence, it probably started in Egypt around 1900 BCE. So that's about 1900 before our common era, or before Christ. So now we're 2022 AD, or common era, which is, 2022 years after Christ, if you like. So, yeah. So, in 1900 BC, a scribe used unexpected hieroglyphic characters instead of the usual ones. And people believe that to be some form of encryption or cryptography to hide the original message. But now, of course, cryptography is much, much more complicated. But again, looking at the history, there's a famous historical sort of style of encryption, which is called the Caesar Cipher. So this dates back to about 60 BCE. So that's 60 years before Christ, before our common era. And this Caesar Cipher is also called a shift cipher, or Caesar's code, or Caesar shift. And it's actually the basis of this encryption challenge that we have today. So basically how it works is that when you want to hide your message, you take the letters of the alphabet and shift it, So if you shift it by 1, that means A shifts to B, right? So in the cipher text, which is what is the kind of encrypted text, when you meant to write A, you'll actually be writing B, something like that, and then so on. If you shift it by 2, then A becomes C, and so on and so forth. So we've done something similar with this challenge, FWIXKMYEAJA. We've shifted it. I won't tell you by how much, but I would like you to kind of see if you can crack the challenge there. So that's the Caesar Cipher. So it's a system like that, and it's quite old, as we said, 60 CE. Now, of course, things have developed much further than that. Now it's a lot more secure than that, a lot more difficult to guess. And one of the developments leading to how it is now is called the random shift. So instead of shifting by just 1, you shift by a random amount. And if you do that for each letter, that's even better. So for the first letter of the text you want to write, you can shift that by 2. And then the second letter, you can shift by 6, and then you have a kind of password, if you like a key, an encryption key that you can use to decrypt each message. And it turns out that that's actually secure. And that's pretty much the basis of the encryption that we use today, the classical version of it. So that's, the kind of short explanation of how encryption works. And it's not difficult to see that, passwords are important in that case, because a password could be seen as basically a way to unlock, like the key that unlocks the encrypted message. So if you don't have the password, basically what you have is just, jumbled text that means nothing. And then with the password, you can kind of decrypt the message. So again, our lines are open if you want to call in. The encryption challenge is FWIXKMYEAJYA. And the number to call is 0743 782 6865. Again, 0743 782 6865. Fantastic. You are listening to The Science Show with Dr. Dada on Jambo Radio Scotland, broadcasting from the city of Glasgow. And today we'll be talking about encryption. We'll be talking about passwords and, making our data secure. So now I think we'll just go to our discussion. And today we have in the studio Otuekong Umoren, aka Baron. Welcome, Baron, to the show today.
Thank you.
Fantastic. It's nice. Yes, it's nice to have you on the show. So we're going to be talking about tips to make passwords more secure. Okay. Do you have any tips? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, usually, when you sign up for in any service, there's always like a suggestion for password. So it's always a mix of uppercase letters, lowercase letters, special characters and numbers. Yeah. So it's left for you to decide how difficult you want your password to be, and also of course you have to remember it for later as well.
Yes.
And these days you passwords are not really that. No, of course, they can still be broken anyways. So usually these services provide like backups, like one-time passwords and software tokens as well. So
yeah, indeed. I find in the early days of the internet, passwords were not so much of a problem. Like, it wasn't so difficult to get a good password, an acceptable password. So people would use things like 123, 1234,
QWERTY, password,
exactly. But things change because the more people online, the less secure this kind of passwords get, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with usernames. I remember back then it was so easy to use your name as your username, for example, for your email service. But now almost all the names are taken because there's just so many people using all the different combinations of characters. So it's kind of a similar thing with passwords. But, we've been on the internet now for almost 35 years. And, it seems a lot of people have still not learned the lesson about online passwords. So the most commonly used web passwords are things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as we said, or password. Even today, even now, you'd be surprised to know that that's really the case. So, hacking 101, if you want to hack, just try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or password. Anyway, so what are the tips then to make our passwords a little bit more secure? Well, one tip is make it long. Why is that the case? Well, if you make it long, the longer it is, the more difficult it is for the person for anyone to guess. So, for example, if it's one character long, so the person needs only to try all the characters on the keyboard, and then they'll crack it, right?
Yeah.
So it takes an amount of time. So you can say A, oh, it's not A. Capital A is no, it's not capital A. B is not B. Okay. And then by the time they've done maybe a few hundreds of characters, they'll have cracked your password.
Eventually.
What about if you use 2?
Yeah, it might just take a bit longer, but still it can still be cracked. So the longer the password is, the harder it takes, or the longer it takes for anyone trying to hack you to crack it.
Indeed. But the interesting thing about it is that mathematically, the time it takes to crack a password is exponential in the length of the password, and that's why it needs to be longer. And we'll come to this a little bit later in the show. But if you have one character long password, it takes an amount of time. If you have 2, it takes not twice the amount of time. It takes times raised to power 2, something like that.
Yeah.
So if it took t minutes or t seconds or whatever, it's like t squared. And if you use 3, it's like t cubed, something like that. It's like it scales exponentially like that. And it gets to a point where you just hit a brick wall. When it gets long enough, it takes maybe 10,000 years, to crack it, to kind of try all the different combinations to make it. So that's why length is very important.
But we with technology improving these days, all you need is like a really good system to crack a long password. So we could take this system like 2 days to crack a long password, but this one is maybe like 5 hours. So it depends on the system you're on, the processing speed, everything. So that plays a huge part in it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And the method used in trying to crack the password, whether is it a brute force or is it like a dictionary method where you just try to guess which word can be used as a password.
Exactly.
Yeah, if it's like a simple dictionary word like computer, for example, it could be easy to break compared to using my name, for example. But I do use my name as password because I know if someone trying to hack me, first thing, if I'm trying to hack someone, first thing I'll do is try their names and the names of those close to them. So, but still, just find something that is not it's not a dictionary, it's not a word in dictionary, and just make it long as well. So
yeah, indeed. So yeah, it's very important. So the length. Now you touched on an important point, which is the fact that the time it takes to crack a password is a function of computational power as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of brings up a security flaw in the way we encrypt data. And this is talking about everyone, talking about the entire system, the classical way of encrypting data. It depends on an assumption that the hacker, doesn't have a fantastic quantum computer.
Yeah.
Because quantum computers can solve this kind of problem. This is one of the kind of problems they can solve fantastically well, which is, being able to, for example, do prime factorization, so factorizing large prime numbers. And this has an application in encryption as well. So yeah, that's a very interesting point. Now, the other thing that it says as a tip for our listeners to make the password stronger is to use a nonsense phrase. As you said earlier, don't use something that means something, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Use something that doesn't mean anything. Like, a bit like, the encryption challenge we have today. Something that you can't guess, just as random as you can, So make it long, make it random, make it, a nonsense phrase. Then the third one is include numbers and symbols. So uppercase, match uppercase and lowercase, use symbols, use @ symbols, use, whatever is allowed. Different password systems allow different kinds of characters. But, instead of 0, you can use O. Instead of O, you can use 0. Instead of S, you can use 5. You can just make it interesting, So that's another way to make it even more difficult to guess. And then avoid using, so Baron touched on this already, avoid using obvious personal information.
Exactly.
You don't want to put your name, right? That's the password. And then this is very important. A lot of people think once they've made a password, then they can just use that password. Oh, this is quite a nice password. I remember it and it's nice. I just use it for my email, I use it for my bank and everything. That's a no-go. Like, do not use it twice. Don't reuse it. And if you've used it before and it's expired and you've changed it, don't go back to the older ones because that's a huge risk as well. And another thing that's suggested, use a password manager. So there are so many services. I know Apple has one. Maybe Microsoft even has one, a way to store your passwords.
Yeah, Google has as well. The Chrome app,
Fantastic. So, that way you don't have to, sometimes maybe you don't remember all your passwords, but that's okay because you have this device that helps you not only organize your passwords or remember your passwords, it also helps you with suggestions to make really strong passwords.
Yeah.
And don't give your passwords away. That's an obvious one, but don't give it to anyone. Don't send it to someone via any means, always keep it to yourself. And then finally, change your passwords regularly. Have a kind of time, maybe every couple of months. I don't know. You just try to keep it fresh, Some organizations automate that process. They make sure the passwords expire after a few months and then you have to change, and so on. So those are some tips for you to make your passwords more secure. You are listening to The Science Show on Jambo Radio with Dr. Dada. And we've been talking about encryption. We've talked about ways to make your password more secure. And now we're going to be looking at the question about the future of data encryption. In particular, whether our data is future-proof. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier as well. But when it comes to the security, future security of our data, maybe you've heard already that the security sort of encryption system that we use now, it depends on an assumption. And that assumption is very critical, which is that your adversary, the person who's trying to hack or trying to guess your password, doesn't have unlimited computing resources at their disposal. So the moment you take away that assumption, none of our data that's secured using the traditional way of encryption, none of it is secure anymore. So what it means is that actually our data is not future-proof. The security of our data is not future-proof because computers are getting more and more powerful all the time, and then there is a threat from quantum computers, which are particularly good at solving the factoring problems that form the basis of a lot of the security that we have. So what to do about that then? Well, what to do is to use quantum cryptography. So what is quantum cryptography? Well, quantum cryptography is a way of generating, if you like, passwords or keys, which depends on quantum physics. And it uses some properties, some characteristics of quantum physics. And one is that particles can exist in more than one place at the same time, which is the superposition that we talked about in a previous show. And also that, in particular, that a quantum particle cannot be observed without changing or disturbing it. Now that leads to unconditional security. Why? It is because it means that you can know when somebody has stolen your password. And I think that's one of the critical flaws of the security, like the encryption as we have it today, which is the fact that no matter how secure your password or your encryption system is, currently there's no way to know if someone has actually made a copy of your password. There's no way to know that. But quantum mechanics allows you to do that. It allows you to have a way to know that someone has listened to your message or to your password. And then once you know, that gives you the ability to secure yourself against that. And again, already mentioned, another property of quantum mechanics that is exploited in quantum cryptography is that information cannot be copied, or particles, the information carried by quantum particles cannot be copied. And that's called the no cloning theorem in quantum physics. And so all these three properties means that you can have an encryption system that is provably secure, and it's future-proof. No matter how powerful computers get, you still can't crack it. I think this needs another show, a show on its own, to go deeper into quantum cryptography. But yeah, that's the sort of basic idea of that. So yes, so the answer is kind of yes and no as to whether our information in future is secure. If you continue to encrypt things the way we do in most of the communication we have now, then it is not secure. But if you use quantum cryptography, then once again, it is secure. So that's fantastic. So now lines are now closed. So we'll reveal the answer for the challenge that we posed earlier. So the challenge was Fwix Mieja. It actually doesn't make any sense, does it? FWIXK MYEAJYA. Can you guess what that says? Well, this ciphertext was created using the Caesar Cipher by moving the alphabet 4 places. Yay! So if you moved it 4 places down, you'll get the answer. If you move it 4 places down, you'll get this text that doesn't mean anything. But actually, if you then restore, if you do the one-to-one correspondence of the text, it actually spells Jambo science. If you got that, you can put that, put a pat on your, pat yourself on the back for getting that. Yay! Fantastic. So now we've come to near the end of our show. So what we're going to do is that we are going to share one or two science jokes, and then we'll listen to the song, the STEM song of the week. Now, the joke that we're going to listen to is, what is a hacker's favorite season? Any ideas? Fishing season. Of course, fishing is hacking activity, isn't it? It's a way of getting people's information and using it against them. So, of course, that's a hacker's favorite season. Now, to conclude the show, we're going to listen to a song. Now, this song was actually written by myself, and It is entitled Kilele. And that will play us out of the show today. But before we go, we'd just like to thank you for listening. We thank Baron for joining us on the show today. And we'll encourage you to have a listen to us on DAB and listen and watch us live on jamboradio.co.uk. And of course, you can catch this episode once again if you go to the Jambo Radio Scotland YouTube channel. So we'd like to thank you and thank our crew in the studio. And with that, I'll say have a science-filled week. So let's listen to Kilele.
Kana musica, yeah. Coming down with this something. Baby, talk to me. Help me check this thing. I need you desperately. I want you endlessly. Your eyes keep calling me. I feel you constantly. See how you blew me away. I feel in my soul and my heart on a daily. Cricketer, which kind of bonga feeling be this change? Kilele, 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 kilele. What it is? Kilele, 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 kilele. Which kind of bonga feeling be this change? You are the winner, yeah, and this is getting stronger, yeah. So hold me closer, let's make it over. Love you forever, no matter the weather. See how you blew me away. I feel in my heart and my soul on a daily. Rickety, clickata, which kind of bonga feelings be this change? Kilele, 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 kilele. What it is? Kilele, 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 which kind of bonga feeling? Remix, me happy, feel better, feel yakata. Spot tag bada, me happy, full ground scatter. Me I go, Afijo, a new dancer. Come me say, come me down with this something, eh. And there's something in the sweet me, eh. And it is feeling like a movie, eh. And I never been so groovy, eh. Kilele, 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 kilele. What it is? Kilele, 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 kilele. What it is?